When you think of the Battle of Badr, what comes to mind? Probably one single decisive epic clash, right? But the real story, the one that sets the stage, isn't just about that one day. It's about the 2-year chess match that led up to it. It was a series of strategic missions, escalating tensions, and very real threats that made a major confrontation pretty much inevitable. So let's trace those critical steps on the road to Badr.
And things got serious fast. This wasn't some vague warning whispered in the dark. No, this was a direct, chilling message sent from the leaders of Mecca to the brand new community in Al-Madeenah. The lines were being drawn in the sand, and the message was unmistakable. We will not tolerate your new society. So you have to ask, what could possibly provoke a threat like that? Well, after the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his followers migrated to Al-Madeenah, they found something they hadn't had before: stability. For the first time, they had a secure base. But back in Mecca, the leadership didn't see peace. They saw a problem, a direct and growing threat to their entire way of life. And for the Quraish, these fears ran deep. This wasn't just about a different religion. It was about power, the very real possibility that their long-held rule in Mecca could end. It was about economics, because this new community in Al-Madeenah was sitting right on top of their vital trade route to Syria. And it was about their identity, a fundamental challenge to their tribal system and everything they'd ever known. For them, the stakes just couldn't be higher. So with their power, their money, and their whole way of life feeling threatened, the Quraysh didn't just sit around and worry. They acted. The historical sources are really clear on this. They were the ones who declared war first. And not just with words, but with a series of aggressive actions. I mean, imagine this scene. You're in the very heart of Mecca, right at the Kaaba. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, one of the leaders from Al-Madeenah, is there to perform a pilgrimage, and he's confronted by Abu Jahl, a top chieftain from Mecca. Abu Jahl threatens him, but Sa'd's response, wow, it was a stark reminder of the new reality. He essentially said, the game has changed. That economic lifeline you depend on, your trade route, it runs right through our backyard now. Let's just put this side by side for a second, because the difference in what each side was doing is, well, it's night and day. While the Muslims were focused inward on building their new community, establishing brotherhood, the Quraysh were focused outward on pure aggression. They blocked access to the pilgrimage, they sent letters trying to start a civil war, and they flat out declared the Muslims enemies. So let's recap where we are. The Muslims have been driven from their homes, their wealth has been stolen, and now their entire existence is being threatened with annihilation. Mecca had officially declared war, both in what they said and what they did. This set the stage for a truly pivotal moment. Now, this is really important to understand. The permission that came wasn't a command to go out and start a war. Not at all. It was a response. It was a divinely sanctioned right to self-defense against years of persecution and an open declaration of war. It was permission to finally take the necessary steps to ensure their community could survive. So with this divine permission, you might expect an immediate, all-out war, right? But that's not what happened. Instead, the Prophet, peace be upon him, initiated something much smarter, a series of small-scale, highly strategic military missions. Each one was designed with a very specific purpose, all aimed at shifting the balance of power. And wow, did things start moving fast. That second year after the migration was just packed with activity. You see a whole series of expeditions launched one after another. These weren't random patrols either. They were carefully planned operations, each one building on the last, sending a very clear message back to Mecca and all the tribes in the area. Okay, a quick side note here, because it's helpful to know the terminology. You'll hear about two kinds of missions. Some are called a Sariyyah, which is when the Prophet, peace be upon him, appointed a commander to lead a group. But others are known as a Ghazwah, and that's when the Prophet himself was present, which usually signaled just how important that particular mission was. So what was the actual goal of these missions? Well, it was a multi-layered strategy. Part of it was gathering intelligence on what the Quraysh were up to. A big part was applying economic pressure by challenging those trade caravans. And another key part was diplomacy, making alliances and peace pacts with other local tribes. And right in the middle of all this, you have this incredibly symbolic moment. The very first arrow fired in defense of Islam by Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. You can just feel the tension building with each one of these missions, right? It was all leading somewhere. And then one single incident happened that pushed the conflict past the point of no return. It was a small mission that ended up having massive consequences: the expedition of Nakhlah.
The mission started out pretty simple. The Prophet, peace be upon him, sent a small group of just 8 men out with sealed orders. Their task was to travel to the Valley of Nakhlah, a spot between Makkah and Taif, and just gather intel on what the Quraysh were doing. It was meant to be purely a reconnaissance mission. Or at least that was the plan.
But at Nakhlah, the small Muslim group ran into a Quraysh trade caravan. A decision was made, and they attacked. Now, here's the huge problem. It happened during the sacred month of Rajab, a time when, by long-standing tradition, fighting was absolutely forbidden. This sparked a massive controversy. Had the Muslims committed a major transgression, or was this a justified response after everything they'd been through? The outcome of that skirmish at Nakhlah was totally unprecedented. It was a series of historic firsts. For the very first time, Muslims gained spoils of war. For the first time, an adversary was killed by a Muslim in combat. And for the first time, Muslims captured prisoners of war. Each of these was a dramatic escalation that changed the nature of the conflict forever.
This event caused a huge uproar, as you can imagine, and the controversy was finally settled by a divine revelation. This verse from the Quran acknowledged it directly, saying that yes, fighting in a sacred month is a great transgression. But, and this is the crucial part, it put that action into perspective. It stated that the actions of the Quraysh, preventing people from God's way, from the sacred mosque, and driving people from their homes, were far greater transgressions in the sight of God.
So, you see, the road to Badr wasn't an accident. It wasn't random. It was paved step by step with threats, with strategic maneuvering, and with escalating conflict. These early missions, from that standoff at the Kaaba to the controversial skirmish at Nakhlah, were all calculated, interlocking moves on a chessboard. At this point, a major confrontation wasn't just possible, it was unavoidable. The question was no longer if a great battle would be fought, but simply when and where.